All right, let's get our Facebook groups in here. We got it going here. And one more. Come on, baby. There we go. All right. Welcome in. Welcome in. It is Thursday morning, the 11th of April, and it's time for an episode of Broncos for Breakfast. I am Nick Kendell, and joining me once again this morning, Scott Kennedy. Scott, you forgot to flip your mailbox. I should have told you that. It's throwing me off. I see the Falcons going on there. There we go. And now
Albert and Michelle Knoppers sent me the two-sided mailbox for the podcasts we do together. So thank you very much. That is now twice in a year. I think I've done that. So once for each show. So we're good.
You're typically, really, really good at that. But now it's officially time to start the show. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Thursday. We're going to talk a little bit of the godfather of the NFL draft, Mel Kiper, his mock, as well as many other mocks recently giving the Broncos the same player. And Scott and I are going to get into it. Somebody that Scott put eyes on, somebody that's probably rocketed up boards more than anybody through the draft process. Maybe J.J. McCarthy is the other one, but that's Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, cornerback. So we'll get into that here. Mocked 3 different occasions to the Denver Broncos. So we'll see if that's just circumstance and where Denver's at, and teams just kind of, or mockers just kind of tossing their hands up being like, I guess it makes sense here. But we'll talk about it. But first, we got with First No Fear says, good morning, Nick and Scott, and all of Broncos country. Who, in your opinion, are the top 10 offensive and defensive minds in the NFL? This would take a bit to go through to get each of one of those. Vic Fangio is one of the top defensive minds, of course. McDonald, now the head coach out there in Seattle, one of the top defensive minds. I still probably would go with Bill Belichick as one of the top defensive minds out there. Nick Saban, still also probably one of the top defensive minds. I'll give a shout out to, he said NFL. Sorry. I was going to start getting into some of the college guys. I feel like a lot of the innovation at the NFL level, it trickles up. So you kind of see the stuff taken from, and it has to do with some of the athletes that come in and everything like that. But I think there's more problem solving at the college level than the NFL level because the talent disparity is higher. So teams have to get a little bit more innovative in the scheme. And the NFL, a la carte picks and chooses what they like. So really, I'm honestly, most of the time, the innovation I think is coming from college lower levels than the NFL pick and choose.
Yeah, again, it's cyclical sometimes. You see, some different things happen. But yeah, there's, for the most part, someone has already tried it. By the time it becomes mainstream, I immediately think of the Kansas City Chiefs on this one. Andy Reid as far as offense,
Spagnuolo,
Sean McVay offense, Kyle Shanahan offense, defense. The defense coordinator at Kansas City has been amazing, and I slipped his name, right off the top of my head.
It's Spagnolo.
Oh, yeah, Spagnolo. So lots of good folks out there. For what it's worth, the Baltimore Ravens did a really good job. They always seem to play some good defense. So there's a tree there somewhere. So lots of good coaches out there, and still rather have the players, especially on defense. Good players make good coaches. So, but there's when you talk about the different levels, the variety, the diversity of schemes, it's kind of a pyramid. There's less in the NFL, there's more in college, and then there's a lot more in high school.
Yep.
From, old-fashioned wing tees and triple options to fun and gun, run and shoot stuff.
Yep. Gets a lot more homogenous in the NFL. It's one reason that it's easier to evaluate players in the NFL than college, because the scheme, the talent disparity makes it pretty hard. Where in the NFL, you kind of get an idea of what a lot of these guys are doing. It's one reason that I think the NFL really likes J.J. McCarthy. The drop back stuff, the under center stuff, the passing on third down a lot of times, the play action. I think he had more non-play action under center drops than any other quarterback in the draft class, even though he had way less reps than anybody else passing wise. So it's always kind of fun to talk about that stuff. Good off-season conversation. We got Zach Powers in here. Good morning to you. Jay Roper says, man, Wilson can't stay out of the spotlight. Yeah, I saw he had a piece in Encore, something like that. I don't know. He was wearing a cool mink coat. I'm not going to read it. I don't got time. But good for him. I mean, he's not just quarterback, right? He's celebrity. And that's some of the stuff that, raises his Q rating, but some of the stuff that when you're not playing good football starts to stink a little bit.
Cringe, it's like, listen, you're coming off a couple of bad seasons. lay low a little bit, but you also make a big move to one of the blue collar blue chip franchises in the NFL. You're going to be the starting quarterback, presumably. You're in the news again. So DWI guys, good to see Ethan. Glad you're good. He says, good morning, gents in Broncos country. That's all y'all.
Yeah. Colin says, you want to entertain 20 guys. Yeah, Sean McVay. There's one in there as well. We did something, though. David Youngkin coming in. Good morning, everyone. Mel's pick is foolish. It's not even funny. We'll get into it. I don't know about foolish outright, but I'm not a fan of the cornerback that high. FREF says, Kiper must be auditioning for the Broncos general manager job. I mean, if he was, then he would have traded up for a running back in the second round. So that's at least we didn't see that one come in there. Jeremy Sean says, morning boy, I like Mitchell, but he ain't running Sean Payton's offense. Yeah, no, we got this guy named Jarrett Stidham. Sean, haven't you heard? Now, who knows what happens with the Broncos at quarterback still. We'll see, but Stidham's in-house, and we heard going into the offseason, they like him a lot more than people on the outside seem to think. And so far, their moves have said so, although they've been linked to a lot of guys as well. Chris comes in. Anyone has taken a cornerback is just doing very lazy analysis. I don't know if it's purely lazy analysis, Scott. To me, there is a scenario where cornerback does make sense for Denver. I mean, you look at the roster, you have questions at the cornerback opposite Surtain. Surtain's going to be getting paid soon, so you'd like to have a room that has like one highly paid guy and one rookie contract guy. And if the best player on your board, without like a question, is a cornerback on your vertical board there, Scott, you have one guy on a tier alone, it's a cornerback, and you can't trade down, then I think I can talk myself into cornerback. But that's qualifier after qualifier after qualifier. The odds of that happening where Denver evaluates it that way, where nobody's going to be able to trade up for something Denver thinks is amenable, seems unlikely.
Chris, I want to get into this. I also want to say hello to Michael Ronquillo, who's coming in with some stars, both and a couple times already, breaking the ice for us. Michael, the icebreaker. Ronquillo, he says the Broncos can be revised with their third helmet design to go with their Broncos jersey. So yeah, that was some news also. Now they can start turning into Oregon and have a different uniform combination pretty much every week. It seems like, which honestly, I don't care. Do what you want to, I mean, if you want to have more uniforms, so be it. Great. It's not one of the big things. I know a lot of people really like this, really get into the uniform stuff. Now, let's get into the conversation, because the guys last night on Mile High Insiders did this as well. And they started talking about Mel Kiper's mock and the gnashing of the teeth and how could you do this? And it's lazy and he's not paying attention to any of this stuff. Now, really, I disagree like a lot. So this is my chance to talk about this, Nick. This is our chance to talk about this. So why would you take a cornerback? Well, one, he's not throwing the football. Well, one, the four quarterbacks that he likes are all gone. And the next quarterback, he doesn't have another quarterback going in the first round. Okay. So if you are of the belief that there is not another first round quarterback, and he's not trading, so there's no trades in here on this one for the Denver Broncos, you don't take a quarterback at 12. Plain and simple. So he is of the belief that Bo Nix and Michael Penix aren't first round guys. You don't take them at 12. Now, what about edge? Okay. Edge is certainly, edge and corner are two big needs. If you look at the way this is a discussion that Nick and I have had between wide receiver, edge, and corner, what's the most valuable positions, I'm still leaning to edge on this one. That said, Nick, when you start looking at the edge rushers, Dallas Turner is gone at 8, and he doesn't have the edges as high as other people do. So the next edge rusher he has going is all the way down at 19, and he has Jared Verse at 21. So when you say, I want the best available premium position player, I'm okay with Garrett Bowles this year. I'm okay with Mike McGlinchey this year because offensive tackle would qualify for that too. I don't like another edge for another 7 picks, but there's a bunch of cornerbacks I like, and maybe the number 1 corner in the draft, maybe arguably the number 1 defensive player in the draft. It's not lazy analysis. It's a difference of opinion. It's lazy to just go ahead and say, he's not paying any attention. No, we're not paying any attention to where he's ranking guys. Let's take a look at that, Nick. I can absolutely see cornerback taken at 12 if this is what your board looks like, which it is his board.
Yeah, I'm with you. Personally, I think Jared Verse and even Byron Murphy might be in the conversation. before cornerback for me. But that's me really leaning into the positional value aspect as well. And I think Verse is a heck of a player. I think Leatu Latu also in a conversation. And this is another one where I come back and you look at the board. It's like, man, Denver could trade back into that 19 to 21 range, Scott, and get a shot at one of those guys. And then you have the ammo to go up and get yourself a Bo Nix, a Spencer Rattler, or something like that day two. Then that's a different conversation. But as it stands, what did Mel Kiper write? He says Quinyon Mitchell to the Broncos, cornerback from Toledo. I thought again hard and long about giving the Broncos quarterback Bo Nix from Oregon, but I talked myself out of it. I just don't think Nix is the first round signal caller. I have a round 2 grade on him based on everything I've seen on tape and who I've spoken with. He lit up defenses for the Ducks the past 2 seasons. He had 74 touchdown passes to just 10 picks, but there's some risk involved based on what he was asked to do in Oregon's offense. His average pass traveled just 6.3 yards down the field last year, which was the 6th shortest among 125 FBS quarterbacks, according to ESPN stats and info. Instead, Denver can look to improve the defense that ranked 30th in yards per play allowed last season at 5.8. And pair Mitchell with Patrick Surtain. Mitchell, my top-ranked cornerback, had 46 pass breakups in 4 seasons at Toledo, and he ripped off an elite 4.33 40-yard dash at the combine. He's ready to play early and often as a rookie. So Mitchell's a hell of a player. I think I probably would lean Terrion Arnold, even though he tested slightly worse. I think he's more versatile in the back end. I think he's a better tackler, and what he did at Alabama, I think I weighed a little bit more than Maction out there with Quinyon Mitchell, but both these guys are neck and neck for me. Is this a slap in the face, though? I guess not a slap in the face, but what does this kind of move mean for something like Riley Moss? You know, you went out there and you signed back PJ Locke, you signed Jones to be safety. McMillan had a really good year last year. You traded up for Riley Moss. We've had George Payton talk about Riley Moss multiple times now we view him as a starter in this league. Does that mean that this is less likely to happen, or is because we haven't seen Moss besides Dimebacker reps, you just kind of follow the board?
Yeah, because you feel pretty good about where your nickel was last year. So I agree with you on that. You know, is this saying they're giving up? Did he do that type of analysis to say, well, what about Riley Moss? You know, that's somebody we're counting on to be a cornerback 2 in here. I'll listen to that. That's a pretty good argument. But when we're getting into, you know, cornerback here, let's listen to the guys that he basically has ranked afterwards. Okay. And it's a lot of offensive tackles and corners. So if you're not going offensive tackle, then corner is like your next 3 best positions. So you've got Quinyon Mitchell going to 12 to the Broncos on Kiper's draft. At 13, offensive tackle, Fuaga to the Raiders. 14, offensive tackle, Fashanu to the Saints. 15, another corner to the Colts. 16, guard, Fontaine. How do you say Fontanu's name?
Troy Fatanu.
Fatanu's name to the Seahawks. 17, another corner, Cooper DeJean. And then you get all the way to 18 before you get another position. So basically his next 5 picks are corners and offensive tackles. So it's not crazy to say the Broncos need another corner. We've talked about that for a long time, Nick. We talked about the previous 2 drafts. If it's right there, the issue I would have isn't that he would say, okay, I'm going to take a corner here based on his board. The issue I have is like, I think his board's a little skewed, but it's his board. You know, there's other players I like at a more variety of positions, not to say that 6 players in a row are either corners or offensive tackles. I don't agree with that.
Yeah. The way that fell there, I probably would lean Fuaga or Fontanu or Verse before Mitchell personally. But I might be a little bit trench-pilled right now for the Broncos raising the floor a tad and just the options they have building the team going forward. But we got Jamal Killings coming in saying, morning Broncos country. Good to see you, Jamal. We also got Troy Boer coming in. Troy, we're going to talk about Diante Lee's mock too. I saw he responded to you yesterday. Really like Diante Lee's work. He's been around for a bit, PFF, and then the Athletic, and now he's on the 33rd team. And he actually had Bo Nix and Michael Penix's day 3 graded quarterbacks, which is the lowest I've seen, with Rattler, the solid day 2, round 3, I think. But interesting to see what he has to say here with the Broncos mock coming up. Troy Boer comes in and says, Brugler says Melton will likely be converted to tight end. Interesting. I wonder where did he say that in the Beast? I would be curious to say that. I never thought he was like that actually twitchy of an athlete, but maybe. Am I crazy? My mind went to Taysom Hill. Still wanted to trade down and fill the trenches. Have a great show. Not crazy by any means, but that is really interesting. I don't know. I don't think he tested like unbelievably, Scott. He's a good athlete, but
Dude,
he tested awesome.
His pro day, 6'5", 246 with a 4.5 40.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
that's I can play edge. I could play linebacker. I could play tight end. He's got the athleticism of a big skill position in the NFL, no doubt.
Okay. We're not talking Anthony Richardson explosive.
No, we're not talking, freakazoid, but we're talking high end, 6'5", 250, 4.56 can play a multitude of positions in this league.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's very possible. My mind goes to I don't know if you remember this guy, Scott. You might not have been as NFL at this point, but former Buffalo quarterback, more action talk, Tyree Jackson. He was huge, had a big arm, tested really well, and they converted him to tight end. Logan Johnson, Logan. He was a tight end for the Commanders for a bit too. I think he played quarterback at Virginia Tech and transferred over. So you do see some quarterback to tight end moves in the league.
How about Felipe Franks? That was much more recent. No. Now, Felipe Franks was playing quarterback at the Senior Bowl 3 years ago. I think it was my first year back down there. And I was like, he just can't throw. He doesn't have the release isn't quick enough. The arm strength isn't there. He's not there, but he ended up playing in the NFL he got 3 years of NFL pay as an athlete, tight end special teams guy. Will Joe Milton be that? I saw an NFL caliber arm in Joe Milton. I mean, there's no doubt. Now he's going there with a 104 mile an hour fastball with no control. You're willing to take a chance. And if he's 6'5", 250 pounds running 4.5s, you maybe, you might think so. Taysom Hill in there. There's worse shouts out there, Troy. That's a good shout. You can absolutely put short yardage packages in there, gimmick plays that you could use him in a variety of ways. It's a good shout.
I just never felt like he looked like sudden as a quarterback, if that makes sense, which I kind of want a little bit of
Hill
twitch. He had some suddenness. He's more of a bulldozer type. Oh, there's another one. Blake Bell, quarterback to tight end from Oklahoma, the Belldozer. We got Aaron Wagner coming in, says, since we're talking draft picks and how the Broncos can't risk trading 3 firsts for J.J. McCartney, I guess I'm wondering if he's truly Sean Payton's guy, why can't they trade Surtain? Seems like the move. I wouldn't be shocked at all if there was discussion going on about that, and I think Sean Payton might be a little bit more amenable to that, or that interested in that kind of move, but George Payton and Penner probably not as much. And given the way Ben Albright talks about moving Surtain, I think that George Payton might, curl up and die if they traded Surtain, because that seems to be Albright's closer connection there versus the Sean Payton stuff, given the language we've seen from him. But I think Payton would be at least open to the idea, but I don't think it happens.
In this mock draft, it was the Minnesota Vikings that traded up 5 to get J.J. McCarthy, and it cost them 11, 23, and a 2022. Good Lord. Wrong direction. 2025 number 1 overall pick. So it cost them 3 first-round picks in order to do that. Could you put in Surtain? And I think it was Thomas Hall last night that had a good idea that made more sense to me, was basically talking like a 3-way trade where you trade Surtain separately, kind of like the Vikings just did, in order to get that other number 1. Because if you took a team to like the Detroit Lions, he would have more value to a contending team than he would to a team that's drafting in the top 5. Corner's kind of the cherry on top rather than a foundational type of piece. So trade him, pick up 2 first-rounders, a 2025 number 1 and a 2024 number 1 from, say, the Detroit Lions. And then you've got 3 first-rounders of your own, 4 if you include your own for 2025, and then package those together. That makes more sense. That was a good point from Thomas, because I think Surtain would have more value to a team that's drafting later, a contender. So can they trade Surtain? Yes. Will they? We'll see. That's about what it would take to try and beat out a team like the Vikings, because the Vikings are in a better position to do that.
Yeah. We got Coach coming in, $4.99 with the Goku picture. That's from the original Dragon Ball. It looks like he's got the tail there. Loved that as a kid. It says, morning studs, thoughts on our beloved Justin Simmons if he signs with the Falcons, or who he signs with. Falcons. Sounds like the Steelers still are the favorites in the house, but I would be very happy to see him go to the Falcons. Pairing him with Bates would be a lot of fun. Obviously, the Falcons still need some defensive edge help and cornerback help, but Simmons and Bates would be awesome, and I'd get to continue watching for him and pulling for him.
Michael Ronquillo was in last night. He said that he made it sound like, Michael, you made it sound like it was a done deal to the Steelers. I didn't check up on that, but that was what it sounded like, what Michael was saying. And Michael likes to bring in news bits from the Twix verse to us. So we'll see. We'll see on that one. But Simmons is, kind of he might have to wait until after the draft.
Yeah. It's possibly slow playing. It's just crazy what the market has done for the safety position this year. It's one of those things, Scott, where in the end of the day, you want to draft good players, but when the market dictates kind of like it has so far, you're like, okay, I kind of understand why Kyle Hamilton fell in the draft. He's like one of the best defensive back players, versatile players in football, and hell of a pick by the Ravens. But there's always risk when you draft players, right? There's no certainty. And the floor for missing on safety in the first round is so low. So it's okay, you can just find those guys.
Again,
but
Nick, you get into the case where the closer you are to the ball, the more you rely on stuff you cannot measure, which makes it harder to evaluate.
Yep. Also, the sooner you got to play a lot of times as well. We got AJ Money coming in saying, hello, guys. I hope this is all well. Hope all is well. Go Broncos. Yeah, everything's going okay. Hope you're doing well. We got Antoine Curry say, shout out to VJ. Great defensive mind. Let's offenses look great. I mean,
the best offensive minds in the league.
Yeah, they turned it around.
A decent job last year for the most part. I think he did a decent job last year. When we started going through the personnel last year, Nick, at the beginning of the season, we're like, how does this get better? We had trouble coming up with these are really good NFL players, across the board. Zach Allen turned it on. They started getting better. DJ Jones regressed, but you're out there with Jonathan Harris. That's not a guy. You've got, linebackers, Josie Jewell's solid. Singleton you picked up off the scrap heap. Your other guys have been hurt. You go to cornerback and you had somebody regress massively. It was Damari Mathis regressed, but then my names, I've been out for 2 weeks, y'all. We're talking Broncos. Your slot corner, Jake, was it McMillan?
McMillan
stepped up and played well. Simmons, and then Kareem Jackson was just a disaster last year. And then you lost Caden Stearns too. So there was some personnel problems on the defensive side of the ball too.
Yeah,
not 70-point personnel problems, but that was kind of a perfect storm.
Yeah, and up front, especially. I mean, they just don't got the horses. A lot of the teams that are good defenses have top 50 picks littered across the defensive line, and Denver doesn't have a single one. So I just don't think, and they don't even have, that it's not only the starters, it's the second string too. And just Denver just doesn't have that. So that's one reason I think that if it's not quarterback, I think it's going to be pass rusher of some sort up front. And I mean, the league kind of dictates that as well, Scott. The value of that position. They're your top 5 defensive players in football on a per year basis. Nick Bosa, $34 million. Chris Jones, $31.75 million. Josh Allen, $30 million. Brian Birds, $28.2 million. TJ Watt, $28 million. Christian Wilkins, $27.5 million. Pass rusher, pass rusher, pass rusher, pass rusher, pass rusher, pass rusher.
Guys, what's the best defense in the world? Say it together with me now. A quarterback on his ass. That's the best. That's the best corner in the world.
Being able to get pressure without blitzing, bodies to the back end. Because you can get your quarterback on your ass while blitzing, and we kind of saw the extreme of that last year with talk about defensive minds, Brian Flores. But I think it's a little capped. You're going to get to a quarterback who's so like last year was the youngest average quarterback age we've seen in the NFL in like 25 years or something. And eventually you're going to see quarterbacks who pre-snap wise are identifying the hot routes and can get the ball out. And I think that the cover zero stuff is going to be a little bit more concerning. Now, the philosophy there from Flores was that it's going to be dump offs because they can't get the ball down the field in time anyway. But once you go up against a team that has, a 220-pound wide receiver and they break one tackle, all right, we'll see you in the end zone. Saw that a little bit with the Vikings last year, the boom and bust nature of that. But I still very much a believer of best defense, quarterback on his ass, yes, Scott, but also being able to get home organically with 4. That's just, it's impossible to beat.
Well, it all kind of goes together. If that quarterback is on his butt, it doesn't matter how I got there, but the best way to do it is to be able to drop 7 in coverage too.
Yep.
And what was crazy was the year I think the Cincinnati Bengals beat the Chiefs. They were rushing 2 guys and getting pressure. They were dropping 9. They were in a 2-9 and getting pressure on Mahomes. It was unbelievable. Pretty good defense if I can get pressure with 2 guys.
Yep. Yeah. The Chiefs totally changed what they were doing after that, but they paid what's his face. Really good guard, Thuney.
And Jacksonville, they put money into the offensive tackle spot.
That was not as good last year. 2 years ago, they paid
Thuney. But they addressed the problem.
Yeah. Yep. Tried to do it. We'll see how they reinvent themselves again. Jasmine, $9.99. Good to see you. Always great to hear from Jasmine. Says, hey, Nick and Scott, hope all is well. Hope you're doing well out there in Georgia as well. Jasmine, always appreciate you coming in, and hopefully our Broncos can turn it around here pretty soon. I don't know if we
stay dry out there, Jasmine. It's been soggy, and hopefully you didn't get hit by any of the trees. My neighborhood looked like tossed salad this morning. I don't know if we had a little bit of a tornado come through or what, but there were limbs and leaves and debris everywhere this morning. That usually only happens if we get a little dusting by a spinner.
Stay safe. God. Mark Schrader, good to see you. Sean Burns, good morning. The Boogmeister, good morning, big dogs. Big dog Scotty back in the house. Good to see you looking fresh. Yeah, Scott looks great. Sound like a good time down there. Oh, sorry, Scott.
I want to get Keith here real quick. Keith coming in with some stars. Thank you, Keith. Says, I heard the name here first because you'll always remember that name because Nick always likes to talk like Scooby-Doo. But Mel Kiper likes him too. Talk about Rook Arohoro. Rorge. That was the Jensens.
The Jetsons.
Rorge.
Yeah, that's I don't know, those boomerang cartoons, right? At Rook Arohoro, 6'4", 295 pounds, 34-inch arm length, really athletic, still pretty new to the position overall. Wow, this is really interesting information. But he's cousins with Michael Ojemudia, Broncos country. You'll know that one. Shout out to Dane Brugler for that connection. Arohoro, really good athlete. Doesn't always play super with a good base. Can get uprooted a little bit, and I don't always think he plays with good hands. Sometimes it kind of drove me nuts watching him on tape. It's like, is your goal to slap bellies with the offensive lineman? Like, what are we doing here? What is the point of your pass rush here? But he is really, really athletically gifted, versatile. I think he can line up 4-eye all the way to 3 technique, all the way to 1 technique in some schemes as well. I think he's a better gap shooter than he is a 2 gap, kind of hold the point of attack kind of guy. But the athleticism, the movement skills are all there. The question is, how does a defensive line coach think they can develop his skills? Because the athletic base is super high, but the skills still need so much work with the hand technique, the understanding of where to go. Think he can get a little bit tight in his base as well, which then can cause him to go over. So, again, not a double team kind of guy, but really talented player. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's, one of the first 15 picks round 2.
I don't know much about him, so I listen to Nick.
He was really fun. I got to say, I don't want to do this kind of thing, but sometimes I have to because it's really fun to talk about the future. Clemson was playing a true freshman defensive tackle last year. Absolutely freaking absurd, Scott. You're going to hear this name in 2 years, guarantee, probably top 10 pick. Peter Woods. He is hard to miss when you watch Clemson. It's like, that guy's different. Number 11. As a 17, 18-year-old, just hulking guys. Peter Woods, you'll know that name. Awesome player. But yeah, Rook Arohoro, athletic player. He's going to be in that conversation with Chris Jenkins, Michael Hall, and Braden Fisk. That somebody's going to take him early. Arohoro, if you believe that you can develop the skills for him, he could be a really good pass rusher on the interior.
Yeah, I think skills are the easy part. Honestly, it's the tools, especially inside. I can teach a guy how to use his hands. We'll send him to MMA for an off season and learn how to grapple.
Sean Merriman style. Yeah, that's who I always think of. We got Cal coming in here. Always good to see Cal. Says, the Broncos' best player is cornerback at 12. Then we have a grander, more horrifying problems than just taking a cornerback. I mean, the board is the board is the board. You can, let's say 10 years from now and Quinyon Mitchell is on his way to the Hall of Fame and you didn't take him because he's just a cornerback, that's when you're making mistakes. So I think it's going to be pretty unlikely that Denver doesn't have a trade partner there if they want, considering especially the offensive tackle run that happens there and the offensive tackle starving teams in the back half of the first round. So I imagine somebody's going to want to have to come up there, with Olu still there, with Fuaga still there. But who knows? We'll see what happens. I just can't imagine cornerback at 12 still, despite all the mocks. And still the mocks want to talk about. Zierlein mocked Quinyon Mitchell also to the Denver at 12, says Broncos don't own a second-round pick, so they might be interested in moving back and adding more currency. If not, Mitchell has the athletic cover traits to start early opposite Pro Bowler Surtain. And then also Diante Lee mocks Quinyon Mitchell to Denver at 33 or at 12. Says Quinyon Mitchell checks all the boxes for an ideal number 2 cornerback. He has linear speed to stay in phase with any receiver and ball skills to produce the catch point. He's a bit of a gambler in the zone and as a tackler, so there's a boom or bust in his game. Still, he's playing opposite Patrick Surtain, so his play style fits with a guy who should see a large share of coverage targets at Denver Broncos. And that's the big thing with Mitchell for me. Scott, his ball production, unbelievable. I know it's just at Toledo, and we've talked about it on here before. He played mostly off coverage, so his ability in press man and staying in phase that way was a bit of a question coming into the league. But man, the ball skills here, he set records for Toledo, MAC. I think even MAC football, but definitely at Toledo. Let me see, get the numbers here to get it right. Where is it? Oh yeah, passes defended in a season 25 and in a career 52. Just an unbelievable amount of ball production. There was a game against, maybe it was Northern Illinois, where he had 2 or 3 pick sixes. And you feel bad for the quarterback. It's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, that guy doesn't have the arm. Why do you keep throwing? You can't hit the hash there. You just can't. He's going to take it again. Multiple pick sixes. Pretty fun to watch, but pretty good player.
Yeah, and he did more press stuff at the Senior Bowl, which is a good chance to show what can you do out here, kid. And there were some pretty good receivers out there. Some guys that'll end up second round for sure when you talk about in a variety of different types of players. And you've got smaller, quick guys like Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, and then you got the giant out there. And I'm not sure he probably didn't go against all those guys in the same teams, but Malachi Corley's on one team and in practice, and then Ladd McConkey's on another team. But you get to go against a variety of types of players out there, and him and Darius Robinson were the 2 best defensive players there, in my opinion. Maybe the 2 best prospects there, in my opinion.
Yeah, they had a really good time. Mitchell rose a lot, and then he also tested phenomenally. I think it was a lot of teams went into the combine with Mitchell and Arnold neck and neck, and Mitchell tested better. And if you have guys tied, you're probably going to look for tiebreakers, and something like that can be a good tiebreaker, the athletic testing. We got Michael Ronquillo coming in, says, I'm taking Dallas Turner or Jared Verse or Leatu Latu before cornerback Quinyon Mitchell. I don't know if Turner will be there. I don't know if Verse will be there. Lance Zierlein's mock had Verse going pick. I think he actually went to the Falcons at pick 8 there, the first defensive player off the board from Zierlein. But I think you will have a chance at Latu. Personally, again, I think you probably can trade back. I think I'm not as edge rusher or bust considering where the Broncos are at. I'm pass rusher in that situation. So I'd lump in a Byron Murphy. If you trade back just a little bit further, a Johnny Newton, some of those guys as well. Or then if, day 2, we start talking about those defensive tackles. I think there's really good value round 2 for defensive tackle with some of those names we already talked about. But we've been on the show for 2.5 or a year and a half now, Scott, being like the Broncos, they just do not have the dudes up front. I don't know what they can really do when they are that outmatched in the trenches defensively.
Yeah, trenches. And you put a lot of resources into the offensive line last year, and you spent to get one piece on the defensive line. I think Zach Allen did well. I think that was money well invested. Ben Powers, McGlinchey, I don't think you got the value for what you paid in the first year, but it was a first year. So that could happen. And Michael, in the case of Mel Kiper Jr.'s mock draft, Turner was gone at 8. And then, like I said, what's really interesting for me is where he's got the next 2 guys. He's got Jared Verse all the way at 21 and Leatu Latu at 19. So when you see that, that's where it starts making sense. Well, okay, I see why he didn't go edge rusher. If he's got 10 players ahead of these guys, it starts to make sense. Why would you not go edge here? Because I don't like the edges. Why would you not go quarterback here? Because I really don't like the quarterbacks. Okay, I get it, because you have a need at a cornerback position, and the cornerbacks in this range are really good. They're really good prospects. So I disagree overall in the ranking, and that's why I would come up with differently, but I can certainly understand where he's coming from based on his evaluations on that. And we're all going to disagree on evaluations. I'm okay with that. I saw Keith come in, said the biggest problem I had was I like Terrion Arnold versus better than Quinyon Mitchell. I'd switch those two. Okay, well, that's called those micro problems. Those are problems that everybody's going to have with every board that ever existed. Those are just disagreements. Those aren't macro problems like, okay, I'm taking a third-round quarterback at 12. That becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah. And those are the type of arguments you're going to have in draft rooms as well, war rooms, separating guys, tiebreakers. So I have a comment here from James Campbell. I actually like Quinyon Mitchell pick, and we'll stand by it. Gives you so much flexibility with Surtain and seems like a better fit for the scheme. My big thing here is with the word flexibility with Surtain is that Mitchell has played like almost 0 slot snaps. So I don't know if he brings a lot of versatility to your back end. And with a Jim Leonhard defense, with how much versatility we saw there at Wisconsin on the back end coverages, I think being able to wear a multitude of hats is going to be pretty key for what the Broncos are going to do. I think we talked about Vance Joseph earlier. If he struggles, I think Leonhard might be in the position pretty quickly to take over defensive coordinator spot. He was a hot commodity in college for a number of years. And that we talked about the trickle up already, Scott, about innovation. Wisconsin had an unbelievable defense, despite not, recruiting SEC, Ohio State level talent. They were consistently in the top 10. And especially with what they're doing with pass rushers and just kind of the different zone stuff and keeping guys in front. And Leonhard was a big part of that. I think there was interest in him 2 off seasons ago at defensive coordinator, but he had knee replacement surgery. So he took a year off as an advisor for Illinois, working again underneath Brett Bielema, who went from Wisconsin to Arkansas, then Illinois, and doing okay at Illinois. He's a Big Ten guy for sure. Although he does have a Tiger Hawk tattoo on his calf. Don't forget. Go Hawks. But I think because he has Iowa connections there, but I didn't like him when he was at Wisconsin for sure. Actually,
I like to rip Bielema pretty much every chance I get.
I've met him before. I can't say exactly where because of HIPAA laws, but I've met him before, and he was a nice guy. He took time to talk, and I appreciated him taking the time to talk a little ball to
I just remember him whining about Urban Meyer recruiting too hard and and you're going to Arkansas to the SEC, you idiot. This is going to work.
Good luck. good luck. Yeah, he's an interesting character, doing full personality, but I think he's doing okay there at Illinois. Illinois, I think, is kind of a little bit of not a giant, that's the wrong word, but the talent level that they have, given where they're kind of at proximity wise. I mean, you can recruit a lot of Kentucky stuff. You can recruit Ohio. You can recruit Chicago. You can recruit St. Louis. I mean, there's some talent there. So I'm glad Illinois has not taken off. That's all I can say. Back though, Scott, can you give me the names that went off the board to Mel Kiper's draft before Denver? Because I would like to give an honest assessment of who we could go with. I know you mentioned Fontenot and Fuaga there, and
the one that fell was Rome Odunze, and this goes into Jeremy's question. I like this one too. QB aside, if you had your choice of guys that slid, would you want Joe Alt, offensive tackle, the receivers, Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, or Dallas Turner at edge? I already know the answer for Nick because we do this a lot.
I mean, I'm glad that he put a space or a slash there between Neighbors and Rome because, yes, whatever one of those two is still available, if you have to ask me to pick one or the other, I probably lean Neighbors on tape, but it sounds like there might be some personality stuff, which isn't always the worst with wide receiver, but it's like Neighbors has like some he's a little more high maintenance, where the opposite is said of Rome. Like Rome is like a professional. He's a dude. He's one of the most competitive players and the hardest working players in the draft, I guess. So like that might be the tiebreaker there. But on tape, I probably would take Neighbors, but they're both awesome.
But this is why 8 becomes a really interesting spot, because the Falcons want defense, and one of those guys is going to fall. Something's going to happen. They have to. One of those guys, if 4 quarterbacks go in the top 4 or the top 7, apologies, then Alt, Neighbors, Rome, or Turner are going to be available. One of those guys is going to be available. So who wants to trade up? And the Falcons should be happy saying, okay, we we'd be happy to trade down. So, we'll see on that. Either that or McCarthy. Someone's going to drop at 8 that is going to be one of those premier, because what do you keep calling them? The grade 8 or something of those offensive guys.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I knew he was going to say Neighbors, but it was going to be one of those 2 wide receivers, Jeremy. And the way they're getting paid, I'd draft 2 wide receivers a year, for God's sakes. But the order that they went in for the draft, it went Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, 1, 2, 3, Marvin Harrison, 4. Then the trade of the 3 first-round picks for Minnesota Vikings to come up and get McCarthy, Malik Neighbors at 6 to the Giants, Joe Alt at 7 to the Titans, Dallas Turner at 8 to the Falcons. And yes, there have been 5,000 mock drafts with Dallas Turner to the Falcons, which means Roma Dunze falls at 9, Brock Bowers at 10 to the Jets, and 11, the Chargers take J.C. Latham, offensive tackle, with Quinyon Mitchell being the pick for the Denver Broncos at 12.
So, yeah, I think in that scenario, I'm probably leaning Verse or Fatanu or Fuaga. I think Fatanu offers more versatility, 5 positions across. So you're going to just you're going to plug and play, and your offensive line is just going to be so much better because you're going to have him there. So I might be leaning Fatanu there, but Verse would not be a bad one at all either. And ideally, you get a slight trade back. That's what I'd be looking for. Lawrence Rivera says, what type of quarterback do you want, Tebow or Cutler? You obviously would rather have a Cutler because one of them made millions in the league and there were some good years with the Bears. The issue wasn't talent with Cutler. It was the heart. Can I put Tebow's drive into Cutler's body and still have the muscle memory of Cutler? Because God forbid we transfer over that throwing motion with the brain. But Cutler is the obvious choice.
Yeah, I'll take option C on this one. I'd probably rather have Tebow. Why? Because Tebow's not going to fool you into thinking that you don't still need a quarterback. Cutler might. And Cutler isn't the answer. Cutler, I always referred to him as the dumbest smart guy I ever scouted. You can't win big with Cutler just because of his complete lack of common sense and game management. Great arm. Again, this is the $1 million arm, really, really gifted thrower of the ball, but just didn't have the mental makeup to play this game. And Tebow didn't have the physical makeup to play this game. The talk of he's redoing his release, it's just absolute nonsense. Once you've thrown the ball 50,000 times from the time you're 6 years old till the time you're 20, your release is what it is. And he had a windmill release that came down almost like a square, drop, back, up, over, was way too long for the NFL game. So neither, Lawrence. I don't want either one of those guys.
I mean, big brain picture here, Scott, is the Broncos traded Cutler for Orton, 2 first-round picks and a 3rd-round pick, and gave up Cutler in a 5. So you take Cutler and you get much better value than Broncos just giving up.
You can't win with him, and you would fool yourself into thinking you could. With Tebow, you wouldn't. So with Tebow, I'd have him for a year and say, okay, I still need a quarterback.
Yeah.
With Cutler, you could cost yourself 3 or 4 or 5 years.
That's true. But then you can trade him for a lot. There's value. The arm talent plus the athleticism is hard to quit. I understand why you see that and be like, oh, I can fix him. Tale as old as time. Kevin Gray, morning, Nick and Scott. Big Mile High salute to you. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well. We got Zach Power saying Scooby-Doo. Yeah, the Aro talk in there. Yeah, Nick loves prospects until they are draft eligible. Then he cools. It's the more you watch a guy. Right now, it's the foot in the door conversation, right? I haven't put in the time, but I see the flashes, and it's like, oh boy, we got a live one here. But then we're working our way to the final evaluation. It's a funnel, right? You have a big net here, and then you kind of work your way through it, and then eventually, hopefully, you get sifted into a smaller pool of guys. But Peter Woods, keep that name in mind. He's pretty damn good. Next year's got better defensive tackles too. We got some good defensive tackles coming up in the draft the next couple seasons. So got to probably on wrapping it up here, Scott. Quinyon Mitchell, I would be okay with the Broncos taking Mitchell. I was pretty against it before cornerback, given how the Broncos have drafted it. We didn't even talk about the short-term window that cornerbacks have on the most part for a team that still seems pretty far away with the defensive line lack of talent that they have. But I would understand it in the end. I wouldn't be enthused about it. I'd probably give this, if I was grading it and the Broncos did this draft night, I'd give it a C-. So it's not like they're terrible, but the fact that they couldn't trade down and they end up going cornerback, I just don't think it's the best from the team building perspective where Denver's at right now. But if they evaluate that guy as a future Pro Bowler and their last one on the highest tier, then it makes sense. But again, that's qualifier after qualifier after qualifier.
Lawrence Rivera says 12 is the best pick we could have gotten. Whenever we're drafting higher than 9, the players usually don't live up to expectations. All right, Lawrence, thank you for the stars. I'm going to run through the guys with single-digit draft picks next to their name over the last 40 years. How about Pat Surtain? Bradley Chubb at 5. Von Miller at 2. Mike Crowell at 4. That's as far back as it goes. And then Chris Hinton at 4.
I don't know those first two.
You know, Chris Hinton was really, really good.
Okay.
Was multi-time Pro Bowler. He was part of the Vikings trade. I think it was they got him from the Vikings to the Atlanta Falcons. Was part of that team in the late 90s that they got Andre Rison, and it was part of a big trade. Chris Hinton was really, really good. There you go. He was part of the Elway trade. Chris Hinton was really, really good. So yes, Lawrence, most of the guys historically that you've taken in the top 10 have been damned good football players. Did Bradley Chubb live up to expectations, to his point? Probably not, but he's gotten paid like he has, and you got a first-round pick back out of him, so it wasn't a bad pick either.
Yeah.
You just probably would have rather had your quarterback.
And I'm going to defend myself a little bit here. Last year was all Cooper DeJean. This year, not a peep. I've definitely talked about Cooper DeJean this year. But again, I'm not very defensive back heavy for Denver. And I think DeJean is probably somebody who should go probably 18 to 24. So if I know that we had Jim Leonard, I don't know if you were on the show, but we talked about Cooper DeJean last week, Jeremy, when I was alone, because Jim Leonard traveled to Iowa City to go watch Cooper DeJean live in Iowa City. But I like Cooper, but Denver, I'm just really not pro defensive back with their pick this year. And I think he's probably more of a second half first round player. So it just does not align with Denver. If I was running a Green Bay Packers show here, Packers are picking what, 24? Every show would open up with like, and we're this many days away until I scream for Cooper DeJean when we're on the clock. Hell of a player, devastated when he got hurt. For Denver, I don't know if it makes total sense. Who's another one that would, cornerback is probably the main one. It's just, I don't really love where it's at for Denver in the team building phase right now. You talked about it being a cherry on top, Scott. The cornerback last year, I think Surtain was like 36th in man coverage reps. They're not doing that because VJ hates man coverage. They're not doing that because Surtain can't play man. It's because they can't get home without blitzing. And when you blitz, you have to play a little bit softer coverage on the back end. Otherwise, you're going to get cooked.
And you gotta play a cloud and hope they make a mistake, and it's death by 1,000 cuts in that case. It's a little painful. What's not painful is Michael Ranquillo ready to close out the show for us. Coming in, that's flash. I keep my Facebook screen over here to keep an eye on it. It flashed at me that the stars were so big, Michael. So thank you so much. He says, great show today, Nick and Scott on Broncos for Breakfast. Good to be back. First time back in 2 weeks. Apologies I didn't go on Tuesdays. I kind of said I would, and then it's like I'm not ready to go back on yet by myself on Tuesday. So here we are, back in the flow of things. It's great to be back. Thank you for the welcome, Michael, and the rest of Broncos country. And we are starting now that we're into April, Nick, year 4 of Broncos for Breakfast.
We're getting old. That's for sure. And the final one, I did watch Kurt Warner, but I was very young when that happened. I'd have been like 6 years old. But I loved Kurt Warner. Scott, I think I told you this before. My dad worked with Kurt Warner's sister-in-law, and Kurt Warner every once in a while would be walking the sidelines at the Dad's Club soccer games when I was younger, and I got a football sign from him that says, God bless you, Nicholas, somewhere still at my parents' house. But Kurt's a great guy. Love Kurt Warner. Talked to him a few times. And former employer bagging groceries at Hy-Vee, which is an S-tier grocery chain out there in Iowa. They sponsor like all the Midwest college events and everything. So got a shout out to Kurt Warner. Do love Kurt. There was a little time there. It was pro Denver, but when they won that Super Bowl with the greatest show on turf, I'm like, oh, I know Kurt Warner. Maybe I'm a Rams fan. But no, the Denver stuck in there.
The discussion here, and yeah, we've established that he was part of that Chris Hinton was part of the Elway trade to the Colts. Thank you for the reminder, because the Falcons got him when they traded the rights to Jeff George to the Colts. That's who it was. It was Jeff George, and they ended up getting a pick that they ended up getting Chris Hinton, somebody else, and then they used that pick on Andre Rison. So that trade really helped make the Falcons. That was a couple pretty good players because Chris Hinton was a beast. He was really, really good. I don't know how many Pro Bowls. Yeah, he got a bunch of Pro Bowls. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then he was all pro in '93 with the Falcons. So he had 8 or 9 Pro Bowls. And did he make the Hall of Fame? Not yet. 4th overall. Doesn't say he was a Hall of Famer, but he was really, really good.
And we got Ethan coming in here, $50, says, great show, gents in Broncos country. And I have some breaking news here as well, Scott. We do have to get going. I need to get going. But news that O.J. Simpson passed away, succumbed to a battle with cancer. So hell of a player in his time, obviously marred in controversy, rightfully so. But his account tweets out that on April 10th, their father on Orenthal James Simpson.
Orenthal James Simpson, I think he was like the 3rd. I did a bio on him when I was in elementary school.
O.J. Simpson succumbed to this battle to cancer, surrounded by children and grandchildren. During this time of transition, his family asks for you to please respect their wishes and privacy, with privacy and grace, the Simpson family. So ending on that note, but yeah, he is passed away. So I don't know. We'll take that as you will. We'll make no jokes or anything about that, but obviously somebody marred in controversy. And speaking of the way out, I got to go get more coffee. That's my shout out there. Patrick coming in here. Aloha, my coffee brothers. Good to see you, Patrick. Thank you guys so much for following us today, hanging out with us. Follow Scott Kennedy on Twitter. He's at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendell, MHH. Also follow us at Mile High Huddle. Haven't done so yet. We have facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod to follow. And of course, as that ticker says there underneath, please subscribe to the show, like us on social media, and share on all platforms. Shout out to everybody coming in with the stars today. Michael Ronquillo multiple times, Troy Boer. We got Coach coming in, Keith Brugman, Jasmine, of course, Lawrence Rivera, and coming in big there to help us get even more coffee.
The closer, Ethan, the closer is back. He was on leave for a little while, but the closer has returned. Ethan, great to have you back, my friend.
Instead of Enter Sandman, it's Enter Coffee Bean Man, because closing out the morning show. So appreciate you. Thank you guys so much. Any final thoughts, Scott, on the Mel Kiper, everything we talked about today?
No, again, like I said, the pick at cornerback, I don't think is as absurd or as lazy or as unthought out as some in Broncos country have made. There's actually a very good argument for cornerback in that spot, depending on how your board falls. And that was his board. I would disagree with that, but I'm not going to go hemming and hawing and gnashing of teeth. And this is just the worst thing I've ever seen, like I've done with some of Todd McShay's work. But he's no longer there. He's no longer at ESPN. It's not how I'd go. Again, trade back is still my number one option for the Broncos. Move back some. I really, really want a 2nd-round pick for this team for this year. There's so many good players. If you can move back into the late teens, early 20s, get another 2nd-round pick. That's my dream scenario for the Denver Broncos. And we're what? 2 weeks away? 2 weeks away. We're not in 2 weeks, Nick. 2 weeks away from draft night.
TikTok. It's coming. Thanks, everybody. Gotta fly. We'll see you again next week. But until then, continue to choose kindness and compassion. Go Broncos.